Um, thanks, Brian. Like a few of you, I think you're at the Partners in Urban Community Forestry Conference in Seattle, just up the road. It's been a really interesting set of discussions this morning about funding and yesterday about all kinds of things, including field experiences, going out and talking to community members, as well as learning about the landscapes that have been reforested. I went on a really neat trip to South Seattle, Duwamish, where the Duwamish people have lived for time immemorial, and got a real sense from the great-great-grandson of Chief Seattle about the way the community was organized and is organized, and how the city is partnering with indigenous groups to advance urban community forestry. So really inspiring stuff here going on. It's stories we can bring back and explore in our conversations as well, for what we could do in our little Northwest city to see if we can make this urban forest a bit more connected to community, a bit more equitable, and certainly thriving through some of the challenges that the forest is facing in the midst of climate and other stresses. So I want to open it up, Brian. Public comments. Can I see if there's anybody that's listed?
Yeah, I have had no one sign up today, and we don't have many people in the audience today. So don't see any hands raised. I think we're good to keep moving. Oh, Vivek, you're on mute right now.
Thanks, Brian. I'd like to bring attention to the minutes that were circulated. Brian circulated those a bit ago, and see if we can bring those up. I think it was on the 14th of November. If you need to check your email or revisit it, hope you had a chance to look those over. We have the October minutes. We have the October minutes to look at. Both Ashley has been so diligently working with us to get documented. So I want to ask if there's any amendments, edits, revisions. Roberta, I see your hand up.
Yeah, hi. Yes, I agree. Great minutes, and just a couple things. In the October 12th special meeting minutes and the 20th minutes, my name is not spelled correctly, so maybe Ashley doesn't have my name right. So that's not a big deal, but I wanted to point that out. In the 20th meeting minutes, under the public comment, there was reference to comments from David Jenkins on street tree planting. It's David Judkins. He's on the the policy committee, so his name needs to be corrected. Under the Portland Parks and Rec's Sustainable Futures discussion, in the first bullet, there's a reference to a white paper or potential amendment to state statute, and I think statute needs to be corrected in terms it's not a statute. And in the fourth bullet, I just had a question. There's a reference to food industry, something up to food industry practices, and I just wondered if that was a typo. Or I wasn't at this meeting, so I have to abstain from these minutes anyway. But is that correct?
I think that was meant to be good, and just referring to sort of like industry best practices. I think the words might have gotten jumbled, have been typos and all there, so we'll clean that up.
Great, and only one more, and this is the only real substantive one, I guess, is under bullet 1 in that same discussion, there's a reference to a white paper that was submitted regarding potential changes to state statute to allow a city council to govern a special district. And I wondered who it was submitted to, and perhaps we could add that to the minutes, because that might be an important step in our process for financing.
Yeah, I can look into that. I think that was about Parks submitting that as a legislative priority for the city to adopt, but I'll look back at the meeting and confirm that.
Great, thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks, Roberta. Great catches. Anybody else? Revisions or suggestions, friendly amendments? Bruce.
I sent some revisions very, very late last night. This is regarding the October 20th meeting. On public comments, number 2B, the last sentence, I would remove the word unanimously. The parks levy was approved by voters, but unanimously is not correct. I think that was, oh, I know, in the page 3 under the Sustainable Futures Update, 2A, the last sentence, it's accurate when it says some revenue sources, but I guess editorially, I would think the word, substituting the word other for some would be better, or to list what those revenue sources are. But it may be that there are too many different revenue sources. At first I was thinking fees, but I suspect there are other sources too, because you get money from other bureaus. So I would, some just sounds a little, I don't know, it seems vague.
Okay. Thanks, Bruce. Any other folks with meeting minute adjustments, revisions? Okay. Just a quick question, Brian. I don't see Ashley here. Are we getting minutes taken, or are the recordings going to go for minutes later? Is that?
Yeah, Ashley's attending one of the conference sessions right now. But yeah, she'll look at the recording app afterwards. So
That's good. So noted. Wonderful. I'm not seeing anybody else. Any other revisions? I think we can have a motion to call a vote. Anybody ready to vote on the October minutes? We're going to be all caught up this month with this vote, and I'm going to ask if any commissioners will put forward a motion. Bruce,
I move that we accept the edited minutes of the October 12th special meeting and the October 20th regular UFC meeting.
Okay. Thanks, Bruce. Second.
Second.
All right, so both special meeting and UFC meeting, motion on table. All in favor, virtual or physical hand? All opposed? All right. Any abstentions?
I have to abstain from the 20th because I wasn't there.
Okay.
And I wasn't at the special meeting.
All right. Thanks, Roberta. Leah, noted. All right, so moved. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to just move directly over to Forester's report. Jen.
Good morning, commissioners. It's good to see you. And yeah, it's pretty windy. We've got some big gusts in Portland. Means our folks are busy and probably will be by the looks of the weather forecast through the weekend. And speaking of, this is my first item for y'all. Speaking of the wind now, we had a lot of it also about 2 weekends ago, November 4th, 5th, and 6th. So our city tree emergency response system was kicked up in activity. Our folks responded to almost 90 requests for emergency assistance around the clock from Friday through that Sunday, the 6th. And we spent several days after that on cleanup after that initial emergency response. So thanks to our tree maintenance operations team, the arborists, supervisors, and managers, and our tree technician team, who are our intake and dispatchers. You call 823 tree or email trees@portlandoregon.gov. It's the tree tech team that fields all those requests. It's an opportunity for me to remind you all and ask you to share with your networks, neighbors, friends, and families if they see something they think is a tree emergency in Portland at any time of the day or night, to please call 823-TREE. So 503-823-TREE, and we will get out there as quickly as we can. And talking about tree maintenance operations and especially emergency response gives me the perfect opportunity to introduce our new tree maintenance operations manager, Paul Anderson. Paul has joined the meeting this morning just to say hi to you all. He joined Urban Forestry about 7 weeks ago now, and already has some solid Portland tree emergency experience and other Portland tree experiences. Paul is managing several areas of our services. That includes, yes, the tree emergency response system, also overseeing development and implementation of the first proactive park tree maintenance program, providing tree care, including planting, establishment, and services to city-owned and managed properties for us in parks, but also with other city bureaus. That's also part of his portfolio. Another area is maintenance of heritage trees that are located on public property, and also management of elms, Dutch elm disease, and other tree pests and pathogens that come along that we have to deal with. And finally, his portfolio includes development and management of many other tree maintenance operation areas, such as workforce, diversity, equity, and inclusion goals, safety, fleet maintenance and management, and tree care and work group operating standards and practices. With that, I will say welcome, Paul, and please say hello and add on and continue as you like.
Thank you so much, Jen. Nice to meet you all. Yeah, I've been here for not quite 2 months yet. And Jen has made all the points I wanted to make. There's a wide variety of things that operations does, including tree emergencies. And I'm so fortunate that we have a solid team in place that has been dealing with these for many years. Our arborist crew is expanding dramatically. We have some new arborists who were brought in the last month who have already helped respond to this emergency efficiently and quickly over this a couple 2 weeks ago. And we're doing a lot more hiring. I'm trying to reach out to as diverse of a group of potential hires as possible. And that'll take place over the next 6 months because there's a number of different arborist classifications we're looking to fill. Yeah, I'm really excited in particular about the proactive park tree maintenance. We have tens of thousands of trees that are under our direct responsibility. And it's exciting to have the opportunity to manage them proactively before something happens. So yeah, thank you all. I look forward to your guidance and taking part in this body. And thank you, Jen, for the warm welcome.
Great, thanks, Paul. Then I will move on to other topics. And those are City Council recently accepted Parks report on the Parks local option levy. And I'm sure all of you sensed with what Paul was saying about new positions to hire and new staff. We get to say thank you, Portland voters, for the Parks local option levy right there. It's one of the areas we've been able to start to really improve upon. Because of that report at council, there were some questions that Bruce had that I wanted to address right now for the benefit of all of you. There's two of those. That report to council mentioned computer program updates that had happened or were happening. And the question was, are those related to urban forestry needs? They aren't directly germane to the urban forestry program at this point. As you may recall from previous Urban Forestry Commission meetings, our division has a long-standing need and request for tree asset management and workflow software. This is to be addressed through new levy funding and is part of the Parks Bureau's larger need for asset management software, new asset management software. Parks had two what we call failed recruitments for a position to lead this work, which meant postings were put out, applications were received, and in the end, they didn't find the right person for the position twice for one reason or another. And so that caused some significant delays. They actually had to bring the position back in and kind of retool it and change some things about it. And finally, just this past fall, they were successfully able to hire someone. By fall, I mean, I think it was early September when that person got on board. So that caused significant delays to have somebody to really start getting their heads around it and move that along. With that person on board, they're of course getting trained up and familiar with the situation, the Bureau, their role, and we expect and hope to see that project really get started early in the new year, and maybe as early as January. Then there was another, let's see, but there was another question you had. Bruce, do you remember what it is? I don't have it in my notes.
No, I don't.
Okay, well, since we both don't have it, we'll save that for next time.
Okay.
So I'll move on to something else. If you think of it, let me know.
Okay.
I'm disappointed. I had this in my notes, I know, and somehow it disappeared. So I'm moving on to a different item. Also recently, City Council approved amendments to City Code to restructure the Portland Clean Energy Fund, what's been referred to as PSEF. The new legislation enables the program to make investments at a greater scale and engage city support. Program revenue has been more than double what was expected originally, and community capacity to use the funds has been a challenge. The new legislation includes near-term focused investments of $40 million for the urban forest and $30 million for community center resilience. So Portland Parks and Recreation's assets and development team, who build and maintain the city's community centers, is working with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability on the community center aspects of PSEF. And Parks Urban Forestry, us, the city's tree team and forest manager, is partnered with Bureau of Planning and Sustainability on the urban forestry parts to help leverage those investments so PSEF funds can continue to be a community resource. As we work out details and have something to share with the commission, we'll bring this topic back to you. It's very early days on that. I also have like a summary document from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability that I'll put in the chat when I'm done speaking about that for your reference. Another item, there are now several urban forestry positions open for applications, and we anticipate more job openings will be coming in the next couple days, weeks. It would be great if you could share this information with your networks and people that you think would improve the urban forestry team. Current openings include arborist ones. Arborist positions in urban forestry range from arborist 1, 2, 3, and 4, increasing with responsibility and technical skill as they go up. So arborist 1 is really the entry-level position where we hope to see lots of great new applicants coming in the door to get a start on their arboricultural career with us. Another opening is Urban Forestry Community Stewardship Coordinator. This is a position in the Science Outreach and Planting team that will lead and supervise our community engagement and partnership team and those projects. A third opening we have is for urban forestry supervisors in our permitting and regulation group. And the fourth and final one that's open right now is urban forestry tree inspectors. And these are highly skilled arboricultural and people who are out really looking at permit applications, reviewing trees, and applying the city's code to those applications and issuing permits or denying them, et cetera. I will put links for all of those job postings and openings in the chat too when I'm done. You can just pass them on to others if you would. And then my last item for today is an update on new urban forestry commissioners for the vacant seats that we have. That selection and appointment process is proceeding as planned and on time. Again, thanks to Vivek and Roberta for helping interview candidates and select a slate of candidates. That slate of candidates is now with the Parks Commissioner, Commissioner Rubio, and has been recommended to Commissioner Rubio. She will recommend to the mayor the slate of candidates, and the mayor appoints those candidates as commissioners with city council confirmation. So as I said, we're on track to have that process completed in time for the new commissioners to take their seats at the March 2023 meeting. And in between here and there will be council action on that to approve those folks and appoint them. That completes my report. Bruce. I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, my other question was, there was going to be kind of a pruning was going to take place in parks, maintenance pruning, and it was going to, I wondered if any of that had occurred or if that what's Paul's in the process of starting, because anyway, I wondered how is that proceeded?
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. Right. So that was another thing that was in the levy report to City Council that Council accepted, that was mentioned, that we are starting to develop our proactive park tree maintenance program again. Amazingly, the first time the city will ever have such a thing for our 1.2 million park trees and natural area trees. And yeah, Bruce, it's in its early stages. We've made some of the hires and gotten some of the equipment, including fleet, so vehicle equipment that are needed to do that work. We're in the process of completing that work. So getting all the things we need to make it happen, including right now, working on identifying and hiring someone who would lead the whole proactive park tree maintenance program, lead developing it and implementing it. So we're still on track to have all those people and the necessary equipment in place probably by May, April, sometime like that. In spite of not having everything in place, we have carved out some time with our existing resources, primarily people and the time they have when they're not doing emergencies and the other things that our operations team does, to do some proactive tree care in a couple of parks. And we did some of that on the North Park blocks. And we also did some of that at John Lundy Park, which is out near 128th. Is that right, Paul? Somewhere out in that area in Northeast. I can't remember the exact location. And that work there was kind of a twofer because we are helping land stewardship create a new nature patch there as part of the Sustainable Landscapes Initiative. So that was part of that work too. So a little bit happening, but we still have to develop the whole program, the protocols, and to do that, we need to get key people on board, which should be soon.
Thank you. Is Paul Larry's replacement, or is this a separate position?
Yeah, Paul is not Larry's replacement, although a lot of people are saying that. Here's why. Of course, they're different people. I know that's not what you mean. When Larry McGinnis was our maintenance operations manager, we had one official leadership position, and only one, a manager. We had no supervisors. At times there were as many as 30 direct reports for that position, 50 pieces of fleet. It was crazy. And Larry McGinnis, wherever he is out there, hopefully doing well, deserves the gold medal for his perseverance. Since we have the levy, this is critical part of the levy for us, we've been able to properly structure that work unit. So we now have 3 supervisor positions and Paul's position. And so Paul gets to be the manager we've never really been able to have, while the supervisors are the supervisors we never really were able to have. So it's a little different from Larry's role in that regard. The title is the same, Bruce.
Okay, so is manager higher than supervisor in the hierarchy? So Paul reports to you, and he's at the same level that Angie and
Casey.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. In the city vernacular, regardless of bureau, supervisors are usually supervised by managers, and there are variations. There's types of managers, there's types of supervisors. Roberta?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Just one quick question about the Forestry Commissioner appointments, and maybe I just had a brief distraction, but did you say that there would be 2 appointed sooner, since we have 2 vacancies now, and then when we have the 2 that when Daniel and Vivek are termed out, sadly, then we'll have another 2, or are they all going to come in at the same time?
Yeah, good question, Roberta. I didn't speak to that. They're all going to come in at the same time. Our timing is pretty much the same on those folks terming out. and filling the vacancies. We're bringing them all through to the commissioner and council at the same time. So the goal is to have all of them seated by the March meeting.
Okay, right, thanks.
Okay, I will put things in the chat for y'all. I'll work on that, but I think I'm done. Vivek, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. Lots of movement, no doubt. I am. One of the things that came up in our conversations about priorities was thinking about the role of the Urban Forestry Commission in the Urban Forest Management Plan, which is something that we're going to be turning our attention to quite a bit more in 2023. So it's a big part of our conversation today. We have about half hour set aside for it before we go into the heritage tree nominations, delisting and removal request discussion later today. So I'd like to transition to the Urban Forest Management Plan update discussion. And just to tee that up a little bit for conversation, I think I'm turning this over to you, Brian, is that right?
Yep.
Thank you. Just to kind of tee this up for before Brian jumps in, is really thinking while we're talking about this, I'd really like to have the commission think a bit about where and how we could participate in this conversation. It's one of the first conversations about a pretty significant policy framework. That the last one was 2004, I believe, Urban Forestry Management Plan. So we're about 18 years later. And it seems like what I'm hearing from a lot of places around the country is that's pretty standard. There's a lot of delay in getting these plans, these policy frameworks updated at the municipal scale. So a lot of changes have happened, needless to say, in urban forestry and the way we characterize trees and understanding of changes in places, who's benefiting, who's burdened and benefiting from the urban forest. All of those discussions have really taken on a new tone, I think, in the field. And so part of what I guess our role here is to serve as advisors to the construction of this urban plan. And a part of that is figuring it out amongst ourselves how best to go about participating in that discussion. And there are many forms that can take. For example, we could create a subcommittee, as we talked about, an ad hoc subcommittee that could actually advance a conversation that links, that then ties conversations similar to like the policy committee might do with our larger Urban Forestry Commission discussions. We could set aside a little portion of time every so often or frequently in our urban forestry broader plenary that we have here to discuss what it might mean to, for the urban forestry management plan to move forward. So there are many ways this can happen. Really encouraging you to keep that in the back of your mind as I turn it over to Brian and kind of gets thinking a little bit about what this is about, what it might mean, a lot of the implications this has for, again, it might be another 2 decades before we have the next one. So really thinking in the perspective here as to what this might mean for the future of Portland's urban forest. So Brian, let me turn it over to you and kick it up.
Great, thanks, Vivek. All right, good morning, everyone. I have a PowerPoint I'm going to share. Let me pull that up. All right. So yeah, we are talking about the Urban Forest Management Update, something you all have heard quite a bit about over the last couple of years. I'm really excited to be at this stage. And so we only have a half hour for this item. So I'm going to move through this fairly quickly. And this is really the first of several discussions that we're going to be having about the Urban Forest Management Plan over the next few months. Linda Udelman is also here as well. She's our planning and policy analyst, and she is leading this project for us. So I'm going to give just a few sort of overview slides, and then I'm going to turn it over to her. So what is an urban forest management plan? So yeah, this is Portland's plan for trees. This is Portland's guiding document for the management of the urban forest. So it establishes visions and goals, as well as implementation steps for pursuing those. And it is a 10-year plan. It is by code, by Title 11. It is supposed to be updated every 10 years. As Vivek noted, we are several years overdue. We're almost a full separate urban forest management plan overdue for this. So we're excited to be getting to this stage, to finally having the funding and capacity to update this. And one thing that I'll note is that, which we kind of reiterate often, is Title 11 is an implementation tool of the Urban Forest Management Plan. The Urban Forest Management Plan calls for a city tree code as one of the ways that we manage the urban forest. So it's really important to note that the really what Title 11 is intended to flow out of and support the vision and goals established by the Urban Forest Management Plan. So what's in it? I'm not going to read straight off the slides, but there's a lot that goes into Urban Forest Management Plan. There's an analysis of the sort of state of the urban forest, what the challenges are, what actions we need to take, and it's really meant to be a very it's an opportunity to have a really robust community engagement process to really inform that. And so it's a little bit about what Belinda's going to be talking about later today as well. But also really importantly, and I don't want to skip this, is these sort of clear monitoring and reporting protocols. So every year, Urban Forestry puts out the Urban Forest Action Plan update, which is the reporting protocol for the current plan. So that is a really robust document that we produce every year. It's a very transparent document to really give an update on where we are at in pursuing the goals that are laid down in the Urban Forest Management Plan. And so part of the process of updating it is going to be looking at that and perhaps making some changes to that process. And then why are we updating the Urban Forest Management Plan? So one, we are quite overdue, 18 years. But really just getting to the substantive, the current, a lot has changed since 2004. Title 11 has now implemented urban forestry, has a lot more responsibility, more staff, but also more resources. We have a citywide tree planting strategy, different funding sources coming online. But also the current plan isn't terribly responsive to some of the most pressing challenges we have when it comes to climate change and resiliency and environmental justice. It isn't entirely silent on those, but it definitely isn't up to the challenges that we have right now. So we are definitely due for an update on that. And then with that, I'm going to turn the rest of the slides over to Belinda.
Thanks, Brian. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here at your meeting. So I'd like to just explain sort of where we are now in the planning process and what you can expect from us over the next few months as we get into launching the plan. So since I've started back in mid-August, I guess, I've been working with city staff and urban forestry and parks and recreation to think about the scope, what is really the outline and the details of the plan. So I've been looking at other cities' urban forest management plans and working with staff to draft that scope, and also a RFP, or request for proposals, since we will be working with a consultant team to develop this plan. So we will be finalizing the scope and RFP over the next few months, including giving you all a chance to provide input on the scope. And then once we have the scope and RFP finalized, we'll turn it over to the city procurement process to promote the RFP and invite consultants to submit proposals. Then we'll review proposals and select a team and get under contracting. That could take as little as 3 months, but it could also take 6 or 7 months. It sort of just depends on a lot of different factors. But so hopefully by summer of 2023, we will sort of formally launch the management plan process. And then we will just get right into it and work on the plan from when we start in the summer or fall of 2023 until hopefully early 2025. I know everyone's really anxious to get this done, but we do need to make sure that we give enough time to develop the plan, because there's so much that goes into it, especially community engagement, which is a key part of it. So speaking of community engagement, while we're developing this scope, we've had a lot of conversations internally about what community and stakeholder engagement should look like. We won't finalize that process until we, have our consultant team and really work with them to iron out those details. But we do want to think about this ahead of time as much as possible, so we can plan accordingly. So this slide is just kind of show you how strategically we're thinking about community and stakeholder engagement. So some of these questions we're thinking about are, who has the power and authority to make decisions over our urban forest, who's involved in the management, but also who's most impacted and who doesn't have access, who lives in those low canopy areas and may not feel comfortable having a voice coming to city council and advocating for their needs. So we really want to engage all these different groups throughout the management plan development process. So thinking about the answers to those questions, we've come up with a sort of tentative stakeholder and community engagement strategy. So today we're just focusing on the stakeholder tract, since that's where you all really focus in on. So as we develop the plan, we will have sort of two different tracks: the community, the stakeholder engagement, and then a general public outreach. And this is so we can really make sure we're hearing from all those different groups: people in power, people who are not in power but have a stake in the urban forest, and people who are most impacted. So in terms of our different stakeholder groups, you can see sort of so each row in the graphic represents a different group that we're thinking about engaging. So we'll have a technical advisory committee, which will include members of other bureaus, so Bureau of Transportation, Environmental Services, Development Services, but also representatives from county and regional agencies. And then we'll also have an opportunity for staff who can't participate in the technical advisory committee meetings, excuse me, but that needs to have technical expertise. So urban forestry technical staff and parks and recreation staff as well will be engaged. And then we'll have a diverse community advisory committee. So that'll include folks, we want to make a great mix of people here. So homeowners, renters, people of mixed racial and ethnic backgrounds, people of different ages, people living with disabilities, just a whole range of folks, and especially folks who live in our low canopy and low income areas. So in East Portland, just to make sure that, they're represented throughout the process. And then in addition to the community advisory committee, we'll also do some series of focus community listening sessions or focus groups, really targeting some of those groups that we know that we won't reach through traditional outreach methods like surveys. So those could include focus groups with non-English speaking communities, people with disabilities and seniors, just a whole, and East Portlanders. I'm just really making an opportunity to go to those groups and provide a special opportunity for each of those key groups to provide input into the plan. And then the last row in the graphic, environmental tree interest groups workshops. That's something we're still figuring out exactly what that will look like. But there's obviously, a lot of strong and a strong sense of community advocacy in Portland for environmental conservation and investment in our urban forest. And so we want to make a space for those environmental groups to provide input as well. So you'll see in the slide here that Urban Forestry Commission, we don't have a clear strategy for them. And that's, as Vivek says, sort of why we're here today, is that we want to you all to think about how you want to be involved in the planning process. So I will stop there in case there are any questions, but then I think we can sort of just dive into a discussion of how you all would like to be involved. So first, I think if any questions come up, and then we have some key sort of outlined approach for how you all could be involved. Bruce, you want to start?
I wondered how much is going to likely be spent for the consultant, and why is it that the decision is being made to involve a consultant when they're, I'll just leave it at that. Why is a consultant team being used?
Yeah, I can answer that, Bruce. So first question, we are not sure what the consultant's going to cost. That's going to be part of the RFP process. We do have a budget ask of about $300,000 for the whole scope of the project. But that is an estimate based on other similar reports and talking to other bureaus about outreach projects that they've done. But we won't really know for sure until the RFP process really done. And then in terms of having a consultant, it is quite a bit of work, and it's very standard practice for which many other cities are doing as well. City of Los Angeles is actually undergoing a similar process and has been working on their RFP as well. So there are a lot of good groups that provide support for this, and so we'll have to work with them. And really it's sort of two consultants. One is going to be the sort of technical lead, but then on the outreach part as well, there will be a community engagement and outreach lead as well.
Thank you.
All right, the Roberta's hand came up first, and then Megan after that.
Yeah, that was great, you guys. I'm happy. I mean, I was a little surprised by the timeline being as long as it is, and then I thought about it and I thought, no, it's not surprising that the timeline is as long as it is. I think that's probably a good thing. I also commend you for taking time to in the scoping process. I like that the Forestry Commission is going to have an opportunity to comment and participate in the scoping process. And I strongly encourage you to engage the community in the scoping process or key stakeholders, because that will begin the ownership process. When we worked on Title 11 and the whole citywide tree project and all the policy development there, we spent several months in the scoping process engaging folks in the community, arborists, environmental folks, developers, neighborhood groups. I mean, it was a quiet phase. It wasn't a big splashy phase, but there was a lot of conversations in terms of, we got some priorities out there and had people comment early on. And if there's ownership of the scope going into it, there'll be more ownership of the process and the outcomes at the end. And so I hope that's a piece of the puzzle. I have thoughts about how you've kind of organized your community groups and the stakeholder groups. And I don't know if you want feedback on that now, or we could do it offline, but just one overarching comment is that I found it really helpful to have people in the room hearing each other. So like, in my mind, a community advisory committee could and should include the tree groups, arborists, advocacy groups, as well as developers and, human beings out there, people with disabilities. The more people of sort of diverse perspectives can hear each other and learn from each other through the process, the more ownership and understanding will emerge, and ways to, it becomes part of the legacy, is that group and those people learning from each other, not separating them out into little chunks like that. We could talk more about that later, but that was just one thing that struck me. And the bureaus too, the technical advisory committees, you'll need that. And it would have helped to have those folks in the room with the community folks when they meet too, to hear the community's perspective, so the bureaus aren't separated from the community process, and it makes for a little more time on the bureau's parts. But again, if you hear it from the people themselves, then you don't have to spend all your time explaining it, what you heard in this room. So cross-pollination is key. So thanks for that.
Great. Thanks, Roberta. Megan.
Well, and Roberta, also thank you, because it relates to my question, but you almost in some way helped me put my thoughts together. I think one thing that I'm thinking about, and I don't know how this lands, is I'm thinking about the process of engaging community in something like this, and how did, I don't know if you all know the answer to this yet, but like, I think when we come together to ask the community about what they're wanting for the management of their urban forest, I realized that they could say, I want you to take over the management of trees. I can't, it's a barrier. And so, in all of these things. So I'm just curious around like, as the community comes, like how do we incorporate that? Like how do we actually center what they're saying in this process, and also within what the goal of this is as a management plan? So it's more an open question, but it's something that I'm thinking about, like when you, in essence, not being extractive from the community to say, hey, we got what you want for this, but like actually we can't deliver on that. So I'm not saying that's what you're going to do, but it's going through my brain. I don't.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Megan. I think Daniel was up next.
Yeah, thank you for showing us your plan at this point. Very much appreciated. You know, having been involved in a lot of public input processes over many years, the thing that sometimes frustrates me is that the stakeholders get called in after a lot has already been decided on. And I appreciate that, you know, if you look at the question on the screen right now about UFC getting involved in helping to set the scope, it occurs to me it might be helpful if some other community groups or some of these other folks also were able to provide some input on the scope, so they're not just reacting to what's already been decided. So I know that's a big process because you had a lot of groups in there that you're going to be forming, and it's a task to get those groups together in itself. So if there could be some kind of, you know, fine line or compromise into getting some other folks, or maybe even having, you know, public meetings at this forum or whatever, where it's widely, you know, publicized to people what's at stake. So even if they're not on an official committee, they could have a chance to get involved in the scope.
Yeah, agreed. Thanks, Daniel. Adrienne.
Yeah, I mostly wanted to agree with Daniel and Megan on a couple of points that, you know, my initial reaction was, I think UFC should be involved at each point, even if it's brief input, like today. I think that would be important and hopefully would be beneficial. And then the second thought or question was, looks really like an excellent, very thoughtful plan. And wondered if there was, and a lot of qualitative work being done, and wondered if there was any plan for quantitative work, almost to get to Megan's question of, you know, how do you know how important, for example, street tree maintenance is? So, you know, so I would think at a minimum, the brief surveys to the participants, but maybe something broader in terms of quantitative work.
Yeah, that's great. And I don't know, Belinda, if you have anything to add on that. I know a lot of this is going to be worked out once we get the contractor on board to really design what that outreach looks like. But Adrienne, I think what you're saying is very much in line with how we're starting to think of it too.
Yeah, I'll just add that I think that's a really great point, and definitely we will want both quantitative and qualitative, and also just providing a lot of different opportunities and ways for people to get involved. So whether that's a combination of in-person and online and surveys and listening sessions. Yeah, so there will definitely be opportunities for all of that. But thanks, this is really helpful feedback. I see that we only have about 7 minutes left for the agenda item. So I think maybe we can just summarize. Sort of Vivek alluded to this earlier, but what options we were thinking of for how the Urban Forestry Commission could be involved moving forward. Is one option is to have the subcommittee, so a subcommittee that would meet separately from these regular meetings. Another option is having a representative from the Urban Forestry Commission on the Community Advisory Committee, and then they would report back. And then a third option is to just do what we're doing today and use time from your regularly set agendas for these discussions. This option obviously sort of has the most limited time since you all have a lot to talk about at these meetings. So those are 3 different options to consider. There are obviously other ways you can be involved as well. And we don't need to decide today, but just want you to be thinking about that if anyone has any thoughts on that in our last few minutes.
Yeah, Bruce.
I would suggest that we form a subcommittee and that subcommittee hopefully come up with somebody that can regularly be in contact with urban forestry group that's involved in the decision making or the development of things.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to require a lot of time, and
Mhm.
knowing how short we are for time, we don't want to short it the time that it deserves. So I think I agree that maybe a subcommittee where folks have the capacity to put that extra time in to really be thorough.
All right, Roberta.
Yeah, I like the idea of a subcommittee too. The idea of having a forestry commission member be part of the community advisory committee, I think maybe it would be good if forestry commission members or a member or two that was designated could sit in on those meetings to listen, as well as other ones, so that we can learn from what people are feeling and thinking, rather than maybe being a member. I mean, I feel like the forestry commission members are, I mean, we can be a visiting guest or something, but it would feel more appropriate to me to be an observer, and then we can help share what we've learned or just learn ourselves along the way. But I don't, it's not, you know, out of the question. It just, that would feel better to me somehow. I don't know how others feel about that.
One quick response, Roberta, about subcommittee and others who are bringing this up. Just curious about, is there enough substance from your point, Belinda, to think about a subcommittee and how much material the subcommittee would be able to kind of digest and provide feedback on month to month or quarter to quarter? I mean, yeah, just curious about the level of kind of back and forth that you might anticipate if we were to form a subcommittee. Would it be like enough to do a month? Would there be, like, the policy committee has a ton of stuff they're constantly kind of working through, and from what I understand, and would it be more infrequent, or is there material to be able to meet regularly and actually provide some feedback on, or is it largely going to be in purview of the consultant who then kind of engages in the process? I'm just curious about the dynamic there and the amount of time that a subcommittee might need to consider for this task.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Sorry, coming down with a cold. So I imagine it definitely wouldn't be monthly. I think that would be too often. I think it would be at key points throughout the process. So in the beginning, there'll be some kind of existing conditions analysis, state of the urban forest. So it'd be an opportunity to review that and discuss that and talk about what's going into that. Obviously, in the beginning, there'll be a lot of emphasis on developing our vision and goals. So that would be another opportunity where we would want to meet and get input. And then moving throughout the planning process, when we're developing recommendations and thinking about top priorities and timelines, that would be another time. So, I mean, maybe it would be quarterly or something in between monthly and quarterly, but definitely not monthly. That would be too much, I think.
Megan. And then Adrian after that.
Yeah, I'll be short. I would just echo the value of a subcommittee. Being a members of the policy committee, we're just able to get so much more in depth than we are during our very structured big group meetings. But this hasn't come up. I think it would already happen. But of course, being able to then coordinate those subcommittee meetings with report outs to the bigger commission, I think feel really important in trying to bring that in as a regular thing as well, because I think it's very easy for those things to start to feel disconnected if we don't build that into the structure of our meeting time. So just highlighting the value of that in tandem.
All right, Adrian.
Yeah, I just want to mention, in a sense, I'm hearing some potential enthusiasm for what we came up with before, which was sort of more ad hoc subcommittees, where we say, okay, this is a subcommittee, and here's the work that we want to get done to influence this important work, and therefore, when is a meeting needed? So there's a way to have a balance there. When the presentation was happening on this, I began to wonder, what are the biggest strategic issues that we think that the Urban Forestry Commission could play the most important role in? And I think that's a big discussion that we should have at another time. With insight from Brian and Jen and others, what are we expecting, or what are we guessing those are going to be, and really set up to get those done.
Great, thanks, Adrian. All right, we are at time, so Bruce and Roberta, wrap us up here.
We will have a number of new people coming on, and a really nice way for new people coming on to feel like they're part of a group is to be actively engaged in some activity. So perhaps some of them would be really excited about, wow, okay, let me jump in.
Yeah, that's a great thought. Thanks, Bruce. Roberta.
Yeah, just thinking ahead, I can envision the Forestry Commission or members of the Forestry Commission participating in bringing the city council along over the 2 years. There'll be touch points where keeping them engaged in briefings or other things, keeping them kind of reminding what's kind of going on, and the Forestry Commission can assist the staff in doing that, and should be participating in that as well. So that'll be a cool thing to be thinking about, how to do that and keep our decision makers and leaders kind of keep this on their radar. Great,
thanks, Roberta. All right, thank you so much, everyone. I want to make sure we give time for heritage trees, so we're going to shift over to that in a minute. But yeah, if you have, in the meantime, if you have thoughts on scope, which you'd like to see in there, again, we're going to be talking about this a few more times, most likely starting next month as well. But feel free to email those over for the next meeting. All right, thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Belinda. And thanks, commissioners. I want to turn it over to Nick and Greg, who I think have a dynamic duo presentation here on heritage trees. So I'd like to welcome you back, Greg. Great to see you again. I know it's been a few months. For those of you new to the commission, Greg was a urban forestry commissioner for her time. And I think left only in. I think left in, it feels like forever ago, but I think it was 2021, right, Greg? When you stepped down, or had your time was up? Is this year 2022?
No, I think time is really warped, but I think it was just when Roberta and all came aboard. So wasn't that the beginning of this year? Or was it the beginning of last year?
I think it's beginning of this year. I think Daniel's also nodding about this year, but welcome back. It's great to have you kind of maintain your involvement with the Urban Heritage Tree Committee. And so I just turn it over to you. We've set aside a good chunk of time. We have upwards of an hour for this conversation. So I know you have a full agenda as well. So let me just turn it over to you. If there's any, I know we have a vote coming up here too. So I want to set aside some time for conversation that commissioner is going to have, and a vote that you'll be, I think, requesting from all of us as well. So Greg, Nick, welcome, and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Vivek. Good morning, commissioners. Thanks for having us here. We have a presentation for you on the Heritage Tree Program, and I'm going to share my screen now. Just managing windows here. Okay, So we have a full agenda for you. We have an hour. We have a presentation that's about 30 minutes, and then there's time for discussion and for the Urban Forestry Commission action items. So I am with our Science and Policy Work Group, and I also coordinate our Heritage Tree Program. I'm also serving as the staff liaison to the Heritage Tree Committee. And as you mentioned, I'm joined by Greg Everhart, former Urban Forestry Commissioner and Chair of the Heritage Tree Committee. Today, we bring forward for your consideration a list of trees proposed for designation, along with some trees proposed for removal of designation. So we have a lot on our agenda, and it's going to cover a brief background on the Heritage Tree Program. I know that there are some new commissioners here. A review of the Urban Forestry Commission's role in the program. Then we have recommendations for tree removal. We just have one of those, and we have recommendations for removal of designation. Two distinct processes, and we will explain how those work with each of those. Then we have recommendations for new designations. That's the fun part. And then there's time for discussion and for the Urban Forestry Commission to make motions and move forward with voting to accept or deny the proposed recommendations. Now, I'll also ask that hold questions until the end. One piece of feedback I'd really like is if I'm going too fast, please ask me to slow down, but there will be time for discussion at the end. So a brief background on the program. Heritage trees are recognized for their age, size, type, historical association, or horticultural value. They are of special importance to the city. They are designated by City Council and are required to be preserved. As such, they are considered to have the greatest protection a tree can have in Portland. Quite an honor. We currently have 328 active designations in our program. This map shows where they are located. About half are on private property and about half are on public property, including rights of way. As you can see, not all neighborhoods have heritage trees and some more than others. We are actively working to find heritage trees in all ports of Portland. Since 1993, when this program officially began, the city of Portland has designated a total of 389 trees. Each year, new trees are added to the program, and unfortunately, some trees are removed. Removals occur for various reasons, such as trees aging and declining, or impacts from pests, pathogens, and weather events. A little bit about roles and responsibilities. All urban forestry work groups are involved in the administration of the Heritage Tree Program. The Science Outreach Planting Work Group, which is my work group, manages the program and serves as staff liaison to the Heritage Tree Committee. Tree inspectors conduct inspections and issue permits, and the operations work group is involved with maintenance and emergency removals of heritage trees in the right-of-way and on city property. The Heritage Tree Committee was created by the Urban Forestry Commission and reviews nominations for designation, bringing recommendations to the Urban Forestry Commission. Park staff, including 2 tree inspectors, myself, and Hoyt Arboretum curator Martin Nicholson are also on the committee with community members. Historically, we've had urban forestry commissioners serving on the committee and chairing the committee as well. However, with the recent departure of both Damon Schrosk and Greg Everhart from the UFC, we currently have no commissioners on the committee. And just to note that this is an old photograph. Now, Title 11 directs the Urban Forestry Commission, so this is where you come in, directs the Urban Forestry Commission to be involved with the Heritage Tree Program in 3 distinct ways. 1, reviewing nominations. 2, reviewing requests for removal. And 3, reviewing requests for removal of designation. So there's a distinction between number 2 and number 3. The number 2 is reviewing requests for tree removal, and number 3 is reviewing requests for removal of designation. You'll have a chance to do all 3 of these today. Now, going back to our agenda, I'll keep flipping back to our agenda so that you can see where we're at. We have one tree removal request for you to consider, and per Title 11, a request to remove a tree requires public posting, public notice, and that has been posted, and there is opportunity for public comment as well, which we will collect at the end of this presentation. So we're going to review the tree removal request, and because it is a tree removal request, it makes sense to also consider removal of designation as a result. Then we're going to consider the removals of designation for trees that have already been removed, and there are 4 of those. Now, as promised, just a little review of the technical aspects of this. So the request to remove a heritage tree, this is from Title 11. Heritage trees may only be removed with the consent of the Urban Forestry Commission, except as in the case of the emergencies, which are listed below. The Urban Forestry Commission shall hold a public hearing on a removal request, and consent must be supported by at least 6 members of the UFC. Once a tree has been approved for removal or removed as a result of an emergency, it may then be considered for removal of designation. That is the official unwinding of the designation. The Urban Forestry Commission makes a recommendation to City Council as to whether the heritage tree designation should be removed from a tree. Again, a recommendation to remove the designation shall be supported by at least 6 members of the UFC. So, let's jump right in. The first request for tree removal and the consideration for removal of designation. Heritage tree number 211 is a sweet cherry tree, Prunus avium, located in the Centennial neighborhood. It was designated in 1999 and it's located on private property behind a house. A small portion of the upper canopy is visible above the house and historically looked resplendent when flowering. Although it is a species now considered to be a nuisance tree, it was not at the time of designation. This will be the last tree of this species on the heritage tree list. In September 2022, the property owner requested a health inspection out of concern for the tree and potential damage to theirs and their neighbor homes. Urban Forestry examined the tree and noted major health and structural decline. Per the property owner, decline has been occurring since 2017. The live crown ratio at the time of inspection was approximately 15%, only found in the mid-crown area. Previous failures have occurred in the last 5 years, and the tree was pruned for hazard mitigation afterwards. You can see some of those cuts in the photo here. Many of the limbs are standing dead. Bark around the main stem appears to be delaminating and cracking. We tried to capture that in that second photo. And decay was present from old pruning cuts at the main bole and above, and that's also somewhat visible in the larger photo. The urban forestry assessment of this tree is that it is in an advanced state of decline. The factors listed here support this assessment. In this advanced state of decline, winter weather events can increase likelihood of future failure, and there are structures present nearby. The urban forestry recommendation is to approve the request to remove this tree and for the Urban Forestry Commission to also approve removal of designation. The Heritage Tree Committee has also reviewed the urban forestry assessment and supports this recommendation. And just as a reminder, Title 11 provides clarity on the definition of dying trees. A dying tree is where a tree is in an advanced state of decline because it is diseased, infested by insects, or rotting, and cannot be saved by reasonable treatment or pruning, or must be removed to prevent spread of the infestation or disease to other trees, or is imminently likely to become a danger or die. And we believe that this tree fits this definition. Since we have a few trees to consider, I'm going to present them all at once. And then, as I mentioned at the end of the presentation, there'll be time for public comment on the removal request and discussion and vote on the removals of designation, which we're going to present now. So we have 4 removals of designation to consider, 5 if you include the previous. I appreciate you following along. I know this is complicated information. So heritage tree 51 was an empress tree, Paulownia tomentosa, now considered a nuisance species. This tree was located on private property in a paved schoolyard at the Metropolitan Learning Center and had been considered for removal in 2017. However, at that time, the Heritage Tree Committee worked with the property owners to develop a plan for reducing hazardous conditions and preserving the tree. In March of 2022, earlier this year, a tree removal request was again submitted to urban forestry as the tree had continued to experience decay. Unfortunately, an error in our permitting process allowed this tree to be approved for removal at that time without first obtaining Urban Forestry Commission approval. At the April meeting of the Urban Forestry Commission, Urban Forestry staff alerted the commissioners to this regrettable error and has since implemented checks in our process to ensure that this situation is avoided in the future. So the status for this tree is it's been removed and needs to have the official designation removed as well. Heritage tree number 157, a 70-inch diameter Oregon white oak, was a park tree in Portland Heights, designated in 1997 and a beloved fixture of the community. Unfortunately, it experienced catastrophic failure as a result of the winter storm, which occurred in April 2022. As you can see from the photo, this tree split straight down the middle. No one was hurt, but the community gathered to memorialize this tree. Status, so tree failure, April 2022, needs consideration for removal of designation. Heritage tree number 182 is a private tree, originally identified as an American chestnut, Castanea dentata, in the Sellwood neighborhood. It was designated as a heritage tree in 1998 and last recorded to be 85 feet tall with a diameter of almost 5 feet and a canopy spread of 70 feet. This tree was believed to be a rare specimen of a tree nearly extinct from North America, the American chestnut. However, new evidence has come to light that this tree was actually an American-European hybrid. There was a news story about this that was in the paper last week. It once stood next to heritage tree number 183, also the same type, and that tree was removed in 2017. Heritage tree number 182 experienced total failure during a period of heavy rain in early November, taking down power lines and blocking the rights of way. So the status for this one, failure, tree was removed, and this was due to a storm. It had an emergency removal permit. Heritage tree number 332 is our last one of these cases to consider. This was a northern red oak, Quercus rubra, designated in 2017. Standing at nearly 100 feet tall on private property, it was a great presence in the neighborhood, well loved by the property owner, and a source of great shade and cooling. Unfortunately, during a period of extensive heat events in August of 2022, this tree experienced a massive failure of a major scaffold limb. The limb dropped into the street, taking down power lines and blocking the road. Urban Forestry conducted a follow-up inspection of the tree after it was safe to access the site and determined that the unbalanced canopy and damage to the trunk was significant enough to warrant approval of emergency removal permit. And that happened August 2022. So deep breath, that concludes the kind of sad events in the program. Those are the considerations for removal and removal of designation. You'll have a time at the end to discuss and vote. We can go back and look at the pictures if you like. But next on our agenda is a more uplifting topic, new recommendations for designation. And again, a reminder, so Per Title 11, Urban Forestry Commission makes a recommendation to City Council as to whether a tree should be designated as a heritage tree. A recommendation to designate a tree shall be supported by at least 6 members of the UFC, and then at a later time, City Council designates the tree if it finds that the tree's health, aerial space, and open ground area for the root system have been certified as sufficient by an arborist. So in 2022, the Heritage Tree Committee received 41 nominations across 30 sites, with some sites having multiple trees. The review process for nominations involves first, a review by urban forestry staff to determine whether nominations meet the baseline criteria listed here. From here, the most exceptional specimens are advanced for review by the Heritage Tree Committee. The Heritage Tree Committee convened in July after a COVID hiatus for their first in-person event to visit the trees. That was an exciting sunny day for us. Today, the Heritage Tree Committee is pleased to bring 6 exemplary recommendations to the Urban Forestry Commission for consideration. Of these, 4 are in parks, 2 are on private property, and 1 is in the public right-of-way. 2 of the nominations are for species that we do not have in our program, and 3 nominations bring heritage trees to neighborhoods that currently have 1 or no heritage trees at all. And now, I'm happy to share with you, Greg will provide an introduction to these trees. Thank you, Greg.
Great. Yeah, I get to do the fun part today, but I want to go back just to remind you on those numbers. We've had to modify our review process. I did actually visit everything that was nominated. That's just sort of to backstop what Urban Forestry is doing with their inspections, and make sure that someone from the non-professional, non-city group has sort of agreed with everything. So it actually turned out, even though the 41 nominations sounds like a lot, there were actually only 10 trees that Nick and I both felt had a chance of this designation. So again, it's a way, since there's several new members, of stressing that this is a highly selective process. It's not something that is easy, and it disappoints a lot of people that have loved a tree and see this as a way to protect a tree, particularly from development. But here's now the, the lucky winners. This first one, this Turkish hazelnut, is actually quite a small tree when you look at those dimensions. It's a park tree, really impressive open grown specimen of something that's not real common in the city of Portland. It actually got 2 different nominations, was picked up through the park tree inventory. It will be the first hazelnut in our program and the second heritage tree in Park Rose Heights. So again, looking for that geographic diversity. It's really in outstanding condition. It's got a wonderful structure. And I think someone might have had a sense of humor when they did the planting design here at Knott Park, because it's actually in a little group of other nut trees. As you can see, it's fruitful, but I would suspect that squirrels get all the hazelnuts. So that's tree number 1. Tree number 2 is very different. This is much taller, actually not much wider. It's surprise to the committee. It's a Port Orford cedar. You don't actually see many of them here. They're all introduced, but they're native to Southwest Oregon, along the coast, Northern California. They're becoming rare even there because of a root disease that is spread by spores. So we just don't expect to see them here. And you can see that we have only 1 other heritage tree of this species. In addition to being rare, this tree actually had unique bark and foliage, and we spent a lot of time just looking at it. It also had what we call codominant stems. That means a lot of things going vertically, wanting to be that central stem. But I'm happy to say that about half the Heritage Tree Committee are certified arborists. So I depend on their assessment, and they decided that it actually had good structure. And although it might be vulnerable to disease, it's in a wide planting strip, and it's persisted in good health for many years. That's sort of just evident by its size. I think it's a great example of a large evergreen conifer, fairly rare in the right-of-way, and it's really likely that it'll provide valuable wildlife habitat. Again, second heritage tree for the Rose City Park neighborhood. Now we have a lot of platanus. Some of them are species, others are hybrids, like what we call a London plane. This is a private tree. It's actually a backyard tree, and it was nominated previously but declined. This was in a year where Gina Dake was staff to the committee. She and I both went out independently to look at the trees, and I couldn't see anything but the top, and I didn't really have permission, and it felt like not appropriate during the height of the COVID pandemic to really knock on the door and ask. But it was renominated, and in the second nomination, they noted that there was an undeveloped right-of-way, what we usually call a paper street, and that actually gives much closer access to the tree. And as I think about it, we're very sensitive when people are nominating trees to protect them. They may be within 10 feet of a house, could be removed by a subsequent property owner. In this case, not only this tree, but its neighbors could be removed if the backyard were redeveloped and accessed through, a new street. When we got up to this tree, it just has an immense sculptural trunk, these windy branches. It's just awe-inspiring, and it got this year's sort of wow factor award. It's not as tall as some of the other London planes that are currently designated, but it's very close, a close second in both diameter, breast height, and spread. Its owner is very fond of it, calls it the goddess tree, and thinks that it is the one tree that's painted in a mural at the Kennedy School. This tree is actually one of my favorites. It's not real common here in Portland. It's a lovely specimen, again, a park tree. It's in Argate Park, which I recommend to you as a fairly small site with a very diverse tree collection. We do have two other heritage trees of this species. One is fairly badly pruned and it's on the list for historic reasons connected with President Nixon. And the other is way out in northwest Portland, and I don't think gets many visits. So I think this tree's visibility and just how beautiful it is at different times of the year might actually impress people once they visit because of this designation. And it's rarely planted, so maybe we'll have more people that learn about this tree. So the next tree is a beech tree, and we do have these. They're, along with giant sequoias and Gary oaks, sort of the prototypical heritage trees. When people think of heritage trees, they think big tree. And these will grow really large. This photograph actually really only shows the lower half or so of the tree. And so it looks very green. You might wonder why it's called a copper beech. Well, up at the top of the tree where there's a little bit more sun, it gets that purple tint that gives it the copper beech name. It's in the Ladd's Addition portion of Hosford, Aberthampton neighborhood, which actually has quite a few heritage trees. We find this is common in areas near the inner city that have large lots. But even with the canopy along the streets and the large trees in Ladd's Addition, this tree is even bigger and really stands out. So our final tree is an Atlas cedar. And it's actually out at Multnomah Arts Center. It was nominated previously, and this is an issue I just want to mention in passing. I don't think we'll resolve it here. It's something the committee will discuss. But this tree nomination was opposed by the former director of Multnomah Arts Center. And the Heritage Tree Committee doesn't feel that a single park staffer should be able to oppose a nomination. That said, there's a process where the staff person to the committee, at least as a courtesy, mentions a nomination to whoever's supervising the site. And Nick got consent from the current zone supervisor that would oversee this tree. This tree does have the form typical of Atlas cedars when they're grown in the open with a lot of space. It may also have historic value, and our historian, Dave Hedberg, will look into that in time, but that stone there has a plaque on it, and it's possible that the tree was planted at the time the memorial was there. It's a World War II memorial dated May 19th, 1946. And interestingly, if you go visit this tree, be sure to see the cryptomeria, which is another heritage tree at this same site. So that takes us through the 6 new trees. And I know Nick put this in as his way to thank the Heritage Tree Committee members, but I want to thank them as well, because all but John have been on this committee at least as long as I have, if not quite a bit longer. And it's actually something where you grow in your knowledge as you go through rounds of tree inspections. You become more comfortable knocking on the door and telling strangers that their tree is special and that here's a nomination form and what the program means and so forth. So they've really made my work as a chair enjoyable. I do look forward in time, once I guess you get your members and we do a little recruitment for some missing members of our own, to hand off the kind of administrative scheduling and I don't know, work and just being a regular member to enjoy the large trees that we get to see.
Okay, thank you, Greg. So next steps here. We're going to first consider that cherry tree, heritage tree number 211, which is the only request for removal that we have. And as per Title 11, public hearing is required. The tree was posted for a public notice. And so we can at this point open for public testimony if there is any. And then I suggest that as UFC, you maybe consider this tree separate from the others. So consider whether you approve the request for tree removal. And as we did back in August, we had a similar case for tree removal. You might also then, if removal is approved, also consider the removal of designation at the same time. And then after that vote, I'd recommend that you consider the 4 other requests for removal of designation, and then consider the recommendations for nomination. So three processes that you have there, and I think you have about 30 minutes right now. And so let's see, Vivek, I'll hand it over to you for this piece of it. And if you like, here's that slide for heritage tree number 211.
Okay, and Nick, and Greg, I may have missed this. Did you want to go through one by one in terms of voting for delisting or removal?
Let's do the suggestion is to do this one separate from the others, because this is a tree removal request, and then a removal of designation request. Okay. And then we can do the 4 removals of designation as a separate piece. Does that make sense?
Yeah, great. Okay. Thanks for the process. And thanks again, Greg and Nick. This is an enormous amount of information, enormous field reconnaissance, like engagement. I can't imagine like the layers of work that went into just getting to this point. And we're grateful to just be able to hear you kind of bring some of these, bring all this to us. And so just thank you for this work. I'd like to just check with commissioners, see if there are any questions, clarifications for the overall presentation, and then we can get into individual trees and or both if you'd like at this point. So yeah, bring us back to the general plenary conversation here. Megan, I see your hand up.
I think that, well, thank you both, because it is always both sad and wonderful, and interesting. But one thing I was noticing when you all were presenting as well is just hearing the impact of extreme weather events on some of these. And I guess it's just more a general question or curiosity, but right, we're preserving these trees because they're these amazing, impressive trees. And I am curious if this, I don't know. I don't know if it's an uptick that we're noticing or not, because every year there's been, right, the removal. I've been on the commission for 4.5 years, I think. But I don't know. I'm just thinking about that and how that might be informing you all to think about how climate change, extreme weather events are also just impacting our heritage trees and what that means for like our earlier discussion about like urban forestry management plan. Yeah. So I don't know.
I'll respond to that because it's a concern of mine. It's been a concern for a couple of years. But with the 2 trees that you previously saw, this is the first year in my tenure as chair that we've actually got fewer heritage trees at the end of this process. And that will be one of the messages I include to council. We will have 7 removals of designation, trees that are gone. We're only adding 6. And many of the trees will be celebrating the 30th anniversary of this program in May. A lot of the work of the initial designations was done, in the first 2 to 5 years. So there are a lot of trees, and even some that preceded the program that were nominated in 1975. So I really feel, and I'm going to go and do some statistical work, that we're going to be seeing some significant loss. And we've not only had heat stress, but the more obvious bigger storms, more rain, more snow. You've seen ice damage in previous years. So yeah, these trees can be particularly vulnerable. And I really hate it when I see the scare stories, because I think losing a big tree and people speculating on how people would have been killed just adds to that tree fear that we hear about so often.
Thanks, Greg.
Bruce?
Yes.
I think I would hope it's a wonderful learning opportunity if it's possible to do some sort of collating of the reasons for failures for these trees. It's not easy to do because often the failure is compounding situations over time, but I think it's a wonderful learning opportunity if somehow there can be a pulling together of why trees are failing. And it's often very species specific, but still it's instructive for people to understand that a lot of things we do are the reasons for why trees fail. And those should be called out when they can be called out. And it's not always possible, but so many times the wind happens, and I'm sure there are going to be branches that are going to break, and maybe it is that strange wind, but maybe there's something that was also done by people. So, and I think with the heritage trees, where you're talking about an aged population to start with, they really reflect the years and years of dealing with the humans around them. And so I know it takes money and it's sometimes speculative, but I would hope there would be a way that the larger community can learn from when these tree failures occur, what maybe could have been done at some point in the past to not have these failures.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm not sure I'll be able to find all the reasons, like back into history. I'm looking more towards the numbers and how long things lasted on the list. by and large, my observation, and I'd have to ask our inspectors, Frank Kwasik and Dan Gleason, if I'm correct in this, but these trees to get designated have often had pretty good care. The homeowners for the private trees can then call on urban forestry for advice. Urban forestry doesn't do the work for them, but they have to give permission. They have to actually get permission to have work done. So by and large, for the most part, these trees are getting some of the better care. Probably better than we've been able in the past to do to just your normal park trees, for instance. And you've all heard about that today. That said, I don't know, I guess it'd be like, are we losing more people to heart disease or COVID or diabetes or what? And I'll see what I can find out. It's an interesting question, but I do want to respond to the fact that I think these trees, even when people really have to spend a fair amount of money themselves for something that benefits the whole community, are stepping up and investing in these trees. Leah.
This is definitely connected to Megan and Bruce's questions, but I'm so heartbroken about that white oak because I could see what a beautiful, I mean, they're so rare to have a tree that size and that age, the native oak tree here in Portland. But I am curious also, and I don't expect you to be able to answer this, but thinking about now that we have more funds for maintaining our park trees, like could something like that have been prevented, or is that just an inevitable, like it's just a certain age and that nobody could have done anything to change that outcome? So I am kind of curious about, yeah, just, you know, like you were saying, that maintenance is really important to like help these trees live as long as they possibly could. And then amidst all of the stresses that they're having with weather events. So I'm hopeful that, you know, maybe that maintenance will help some of these trees last longer in our parks, like that white oak that we lost.
I think I'd let Nick, as a certified arborist, respond. It's really speculative. I think I'm not sure that he got to visit that oak tree in particular. We've had some of them fail actually due to snow weight on really wide stretched branches. But I heard a presentation on Gary Oaks yesterday. It was given to the Vancouver Urban Forestry Commission. It actually might be, if you ever have room for such a presentation, interesting to this group. We have 24 of them designated, so it is our most common heritage tree. But Nick, you want to speculate or are you going to decline?
Sure, I can briefly speculate, but then I also want to make sure we get to the voting that needs to occur because we have a lot to move forward on. I think that, as you know, I appreciate the comment. Our capacity is increasing to, you know, like the urban forestry division capacity is increasing to care for the trees, and we are gaining more resources as well. So I'm hopeful that with our operations team expanding with more managers and supervisors, we're able to kind of specialize in the work that we do. And I hope that advanced care for some of the park heritage trees particularly is something that we can do in the future.
And I know we're pressed for time, but I want to add to Nick. Thank you, Nick. This goes all the way back to stock that was planted as well. What form was that stock and how was it cared for? So this is what we mean when we talk about full life cycle tree care, and each stage of that life cycle being sequential on those before it. So those are things we're always focusing on when we're doing planting as well. And when we speak of qualitative aspects of tree planting, it's part of it. And Nick was talking, of course, about proactive park tree maintenance, which we heard about earlier today. And yes, we would hope to see all of our trees and parks improve over time as we're able to roll that out. Thanks, Nick.
Yep. So I guess I should ask Brian, was there any public testimony for heritage tree number 211?
Have not received any. There are a few people in attendance who can raise their Zoom hand if they'd like to provide testimony, but not seeing any. So I think we can keep moving ahead.
Okay. So let me move to that 211 slide. So the question is, for Urban Forestry Commission to approve request for tree removal, and you might also consider or make a motion. I guess someone would make a motion for request for tree removal and request for removal of designation be approved, and following your procedures from there.
All right, commissioners. Daniel, is that a motion?
Motion for tree removal and removal of designation for number 211.
Thanks, Danielle. Any seconds?
Second,
Okay, thanks, Adrian. Okay, I'll call a vote. All in favor, virtual, all commissioners virtual or physical hand for 211. Okay, and all opposed? Seeing none. Any abstaining? All right, so moved. Thank you. Let's go on to the next one.
Yep, great. So removal of designation, you can consider these 4 trees, 51, 157, 182, and 332 all together. They all had been removed for various reasons, emergencies, and in that one situation with Heritage Tree 51, which we described earlier in the year. So you can consider these as a package. All of these trees are no longer standing, and the request and recommendation is to officially recommend removal of designation to Urban Forestry to the City Council.
All right, now another motion for all 4 of these removal of designation.
I'm happy to make a motion to jointly propose the removal of designation of all 4 trees.
Okay, thanks, Megan. Second?
Second.
Yeah, all in favor, hand virtual or physical? Okay, thank you. Any opposed? Seeing none. Any abstentions? Wow, that's rare in voting these days. Thank you. So passed. We have 211 and then the set of 4 all moving forward, and then moving into the designation set now, right?
That's correct. Yes, you have 6 designations recommended by the Heritage Tree Committee. And I guess the motion would be to recommend these designations to City Council.
All right, here we go. Anybody with a motion of 6?
I move that we recommend those 6 trees to be designated as heritage trees to City Council.
Leah.
second,
Okay, Adrian, thank you. Noted. All in favor, virtual or physical hand? Okay. And any opposed? And abstentions. Greg, your hand's up. I'll note.
No, not as an extension or a abstention.
You're gonna be okay. Any abstaining? Okay, good. Wow. All 3 groups, or 1 and then the 2 big groups, all passed. So go to Greg and then Adrian.
Yeah, I just want to remind people that nominations are due in May 1st. That used to coincide with Arbor Day, so we had a little more opportunity to promote the idea of heritage trees. Hopefully we'll get to council before that, so it'll get a public announcement then. But I gotta say that without the Heritage Tree Committee able to knock on doors, we didn't have as strong a candidate. So I really hope, particularly anyone that lives in Outer East or South Portland, that you keep your eye out for potential heritage trees. And then I guess maybe like my last service as a commissioner, I want to point out, and it's not to do with this topic at all, so Nick can prepare his conclusion, but I just got the invitation to another 3 or 4 meetings in December and January. So I want to remind you that I have been your voice for trees with the parks effort that's leading into the strategic plan. So I'm on the mission, vision, values, and racial equity co-design team. Long technical, it's been a learning experience, but I have to say that between me and actually your director, Director Long, I think we might have actually got urban trees a specific mention or two, not just sort of lumped into like parks and nature. I'm kind of proud of that one.
Great. Thanks, Greg. Adrienne?
Yeah, this is just a quick question for Greg and others involved in the heritage trees. So, and excuse my ignorance on this, but can the public get to prior nominees over time? Lists of those that have been nominated?
Yeah, we actually have a great website. Got to thank Nick and his predecessors for keeping that up to date. The trees are highlighted, not all the recent trees on the PSU Canopy Analytics, but up till about 5 years ago. You can take your phone out and tour these trees. And I'm hoping as part of the 30th anniversary that perhaps we get the print version of the Heritage Tree Guidebook updated. But it was updated, I think, in 2018. I've got it somewhere here on my desk. I actually like the paper copy, and you can go out, there are little maps of each area of the city, and I go methodically actually to visit the trees and photograph them. So yeah, please, we can get you, I think, outdated paper copies if you want.
And so that's nominees as well as designees?
No.
Oh,
The
okay.
successful heritage trees, not the tree of merit.
Yeah, because I mean, I just had a thought that you know, if we extended it, just like we have Academy Award nominees as well as winners, and if people can easily get to those and see those, right? You know, that it could really broaden the list of incredible trees and, you know, have a bigger map and more density of them. And so I don't know if it's worth considering or not.
Yeah, I think there'd be some problems in it in that some trees are excluded. Actually, they're all excluded for a reason. Some of them are nuisance species. So we've had holly trees, for instance, nominated. We've had trees that are actually in poor condition, so they're not great examples of their species. We did have what we called a tree of merit list, and I could see, but again, it takes staff time to put those on the map. Those are trees where they didn't reach the best quality, but we thought that we might want to visit them again in a decade or two, so we didn't want to lose track of them. I don't know, Nick, do you have any ideas? If anyone actually visited 326 trees, they'd be ahead of me because I haven't seen quite all of them.
I was just going to agree with you, Greg. Yeah, not all nominations really make the cut. They don't meet the baseline criteria. Sometimes they're even outside of the city of Portland and people don't realize it. Or yeah, they're in poor quality. Nominated, they just don't meet the baseline criteria. So it'd be challenging to list all of those. And then the trees of merit, we did have those listed for a while on our website, but that did lead to some confusion because the tree of merit really is an ordinary tree. It hasn't received any special designation or protection, and it did lead to some confusion. It is kind of like an honorable mention, and I wish there was something more we could do for them. Yeah.
I didn't see who was next, so you're just going to have to speak up, Daniel or Megan, and then we'll get to Roberta.
I'll be really quick. My comment was just, I think I said this last time we de-designated. I just love the idea of having like an in memorandum or whatever the word is. I can't think of it. If there could, we've already done the background on these trees. So if we could still just have that space on the web, even on the website page. And then I would love to if possible, in like tree bark. I just saw it came through today, just to recognize not just the new trees, but the trees that are kind of going off. I just think it's a nice thing to do. That's my comment.
Okay. Daniel?
Yeah, first just I want to say thanks to Greg, staying with the heritage tree, and even after you're off the commission, it's great that you're there to champion this, and you've done such a wonderful job over the years, so thank you. I wanted to bring up something related to heritage trees that I think is something we should flag for the urban forest management plan going forward. And I just want to use another city as an example of this potential issue, Washington, D.C. So they've had a lot of trouble with developers cutting down heritage trees. And you might say, what? Cutting down heritage trees, especially since the fines start at $30,000. But what's happened is that real estate is so high that developers just consider it part of doing business to cut down heritage trees and pay the $30,000 or more fine to cut down a heritage tree. And our real estate values have been going nuts. And I'm wondering, I guess, first, what is the consequence today for cutting down heritage trees, and how might we use just our knowledge of what's going on in Washington to make sure that doesn't happen in the future? Washington, D.C. also just passed a law this year to make it tougher to cut heritage trees, to provide their state forester with more power to do cease and desist orders for people who are trying to cut heritage trees. But I just want to flag this for the future. And I know some of us know this, but it's kind of interesting too, that after Washington was losing so many of their large trees, they passed a law in 2016, which said any tree 100 inches or more in circumference was automatically designated as a heritage tree. So that was kind of an interesting solution. But just wanted to flag this about what are the penalties for cutting heritage trees, and as real estate continues to increase in Portland, making sure that that's on our radar. So thanks.
I think we should skip to Jen. I'm guessing, I believe it might be $900 per inch, but she might have the fees more top of her mind.
Thanks, Daniel and Greg. We will get information together because it's more thorough than that about what those penalties are in Portland, and provide it to y'all either at a future meeting by email, some way like that.
Roberta.
I think, yeah, I was sort of having similar thoughts to Daniel, but a little different. I was curious, and maybe this is for a later date too, is having a little better understanding of exactly what the protections are. I mean, I know what the code says about heritage trees, but if I'm sort of playing out scenarios in my head, you know, if there was a heritage tree in an unimproved right of way and the city decided it had to put that street through, I mean, what happens then? I mean, you know, and if it's in the middle of a private property that is zoned to have, you know, to be able to be developed a lot more than it is, and someone sort of pulled the takings thing, is that you know, does the city then have to compensate? Under what circumstances, if it's not a violation where somebody just goes and cuts the tree like Daniel's talking about, but what if someone says they evoke that takings law and they say the heritage tree program is removing sort of reasonable economic value at that point, and so under certain circumstances the city would have to compensate? I'm playing out as our development trends continue, trying to figure out what the heritage tree program does do and what it doesn't do, and with an eye toward the urban forest management plan and or policy adjustments that could be made or other things. So
there's several things, and it's actually one of the things that makes Portland nearly unique in terms of heritage tree programs. Many heritage tree programs are only an honor. And if someone changes their mind, wants to use the land, they can just take down the tree. But if a private tree is nominated, the property owner has to sign the nomination form.
right.
And so we have determined that it could be recommended to council. We require a consent form, and it's actually a very formal thing. And it notes that this will be recorded against the property. So when you buy a property with a designated heritage tree, your title company is going to tell you you have this constraint. If you're the existing property owner, you've agreed to it. So it's really the only place it's ever been a problem is we've had some homeowners hesitate because they were concerned that it might impact the value of their property. In the past, we've had more property owners see it as a tool to actually protect something. They know their house could be taken down, but at least this magnificent tree that's older than the house, for instance, will remain. So I think the takings, because it's something that someone has volunteered and then someone's aware of when they buy it, is not an issue. I think what is more problematic is that the fee may still be too low. You have a big Gary oak, it still may be worth, you know, say it's $1,000 an inch. It may just still be worth taking down that tree. And really it's only public pressure and embarrassment that might dissuade someone that has the opportunity to make a lot of money.
All right. Thanks, Greg, and thanks, Nick, again for that real robust discussion. Anything else that you wanted to close us out with before we close the meeting for the day?
I forgot one part of what Roberta talked about, and that was the undeveloped right-of-ways or rights-of-way. Actually, the city bureaus get notified when a tree is in the right-of-way. Parks, Urban Forestry actually maintains those trees, which is why they really hold them to a high standard. Any development, like we had a Doug fir out near Powell Butte last year, unimproved except for like the pavement, no curb, sidewalk, and so forth. The design will have to be built around the tree in a way that does not impact it. So this is actually something where, for instance, Bruce has been a real advocate trying to get some trees designated out in Northeast Portland that are in those undeveloped right-of-ways as a way to protect them from future street development. But it's got to be a really large tree or rare.
Unless we develop an entirely different designation, just saying. Urban Forestry Management Plan is in the works after all. So thanks again, Greg and Nick. This really kind of brings us to a place of recognizing the enormous amount of work ahead of us still. So really grateful for all your input today. I want to recognize your time, all the effort you're putting in, volunteering your time here, supporting the city, doing this hard work. And looking forward to our meeting. I think we're on for December, that third Thursday again. Back in the day when we were meeting in person, it was so nice. We would meet at the Heathman Hotel downtown for breakfast and talk shop and talk not shop. And it was a lovely gesture Urban Forestry would offer us in a way to be able to come together and meet. Though now that we're virtual, we could bring our breakfast to our next meeting, I suppose, and just have a little time to talk about other things. So if there are any agenda items, as always, send them to Brian, Jen, me, and we will work through that. Love to keep the momentum going with this Urban Forestry Management Plan discussion, as well as a number of other priorities that seem to be coming up. So thanks again for joining today. Look forward to staying in touch, and we'll see you next time, if not sooner.
Thanks, everyone.